Alalle, 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 kulle diyale. Alalle, 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 alalle.
Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Nature Connection show with Nancy Reed and Lisa Smith, the mother-daughter travel team and publishers of Big Blend Radio and TV magazine and Parks and Travel magazine. Now, you heard that music. That's, Adam's music.
Yes.
No one else gets that music, even though it doesn't sound like music from Myanmar. We've got wildlife conservation expert Adam Roberts joining us. We call him the compassionate conservationist. And he just came back from Myanmar, where he's a senior advisor to the Elephant Project, an incredible program, really changing how we view animal welfare, how to help animals by working with people. It's just a completely different concept and very exciting. I encourage you to go to their website. It's theelephantproject.net. I know that they're looking at all elephants, but right now, especially working in Myanmar. So welcome back. How are you doing, compassionate conservationist?
I am great. An amazing trip, and just now finally getting over the jet lag. So it's good to be back and keep the progress moving for the project. So thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, no, we were following this when you and Dane were out there, and it was, Myanmar. Have you ever been there before?
Actually I haven't. And so that was another amazing part of the trip was, I've been to other parts in Southeast Asia and South Asia. I've been to Sri Lanka and Thailand and elsewhere. So it was really good to be there and sort of experience the culture and the people and also the politics of the place to have a better understanding of how things work so that we can better succeed. So it was the first time out there and definitely not the last.
Yeah, it just seems such a magical place. It's just this mystical feeling. I was watching you guys on social media, and it seemed to be. I thought you would be out with elephants all the time. That's just what you picture. And I did get to see you guys out with some elephants, and I have questions about that too. But it seemed like you might have had a little break to kind of see some of the temples and some of the scenery and surroundings. But it seemed like you were in one meeting after another, and I'm like, oh, come on, Adam, you got to go out in the bush. But the reality is that was the important thing, is to connect with the people, the local governments, and it just seemed like you were making a lot of progress in all these conversations.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of progress. But on the sightseeing part of the trip, it was actually it was a really good opportunity. Historically, when I've done these international trips, and there have certainly been many over the years, there's sort of 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it is of rather rigorous meeting schedules and getting through conferences and whatever the nuts and bolts of the work is, and then oftentimes that, if I'm lucky, may be followed by some time out in the bush on safari, doing something to unwind and experience the country. But in this case, it was all kind of intertwined in the same week, but there was actually a good reason for that. It wasn't just the way the logistics or the timing worked out. It was in part because the nature of this project is a socioeconomic one. It's a capitalist one, if you will, a free market solution to these elephant problems of captive elephants. And so, we want to build this elephant sanctuary, but as you know, in order to fund the elephant sanctuary, we want to have a real estate development where people buy homes, and the price that's paid for those home purchases and the ongoing property taxes and all the related portions of that enterprise fund the sanctuary for the elephants. In order to do that effectively, we need to be able to sell Myanmar as a location for people to want to live, vacation, buy a home. And so being able to be out there and see these 1,000-year-old temples, experience the culture, the food, the people, the environment was really important. So when it comes time to put a shovel in the ground and start explaining to people why it's so important that they invest in Myanmar, we had to really have that firsthand experience to be able to talk about it effectively. So that was in part why why it wasn't just elephant pictures that we were posting from the trip. There was also the visits to the temples and so much more.
It just looks so mystical to me and so peaceful. And I know that there is issues going on in the country, but I want to back up a little bit. because when we think about the elephants, we think about poaching immediately, especially now with,
Hmm.
now we can, go poach and bring back elephant, tusks and, you know, the ivory's pretty much been opened up again here in this country with recent
Hmm.
leadership changes and things that's happening. But so, but I'm looking at when we think about Myanmar, we now it's like now we're going to a different world of that. Is it poaching? Is it the logging industry in regards to the elephants? What's their biggest harm?
So, as is the case with so many other places, I would say it's hard to identify the quote unquote biggest harm because, elephants I've always noticed have so many different threats. So if you look at elephants, in the US, right, you've got elephants that are being imported from the wild for zoos or circuses. You have elephants in captivity suffering in zoos and circuses and being shuttled from one place to another. In Africa, you've got elephants being captured and sent to the United States or other countries for captivity, but you've also got elephants being poached for their ivory, or in Africa for their bushmeat. No matter where you go, where there are elephants, either captive or wild, there are myriad threats that face the elephants, and Myanmar is no exception. So in Myanmar, you have a strong, comparatively strong, viable population of elephants compared to elsewhere throughout Asia. But elephants in the wild are being poached. And in fact, over the past kind of 8 years, they've been poached in greater frequency, an alarming number, more so than ever before, hundreds of elephants being poached. Part of that, for the males, there is some ivory poaching, but there's also an increasing number of elephants that are being killed for their skins, which are used in traditional Asian medicine. The skins are ground into a fine powder and ingested or made into jewelry that, when worn, is thought to have some healing properties. So there's this ongoing poaching of elephants in Myanmar for their skin, again for their ivory. There's human-elephant conflict issues where elephants are being killed because of conflict with humans. So again, you have all of these different types of threat facing the wild elephants in the country. But then on top of that, you have 5,000 captive elephants that were used in the forestry industry and the timber industry. And those elephants are fundamentally now unemployed. So you've got about half of that number, roughly 2,500 that were in private hands, and a similar number that were owned by the government and leased out to these logging companies. And these elephants were used to drag logs, timber, trees out of the teak forests for use in the teak wood industry. But because of the deforestation and the threats to the environment, the country a few years ago put a fundamental stop on the teak forestry, stop on logging, stop on exports. And so now you have this 5,000 elephants, as I say, that are unemployed, and something really has to be done with these elephants, because if not, we fear that they're going to end up either being released back into the wild completely in an ad hoc fashion with no plan in place for their protection, because you have these private elephant owners that can no longer afford their care. And then, of course, there's the chance for poaching for their ivory, poaching for their skins, being killed in human-elephant conflict, or they're going to be sold to zoos or other captive institutions. And so that's why the Elephant Project, I think, is so important, and the Elephant Project's focus on Myanmar is so important, because we're going to try and provide this sanctuary opportunity for these elephants in a self-funding way. So there really are a number of threats in Myanmar, just as everywhere else in the world. But at least for the captive elephants, we think we have a viable solution.
It's just incredible how how widespread it is, and how, it is all at the hands of man. You know what I mean? The elephants did not do this to themselves.
No.
But yeah, what scares me is you get those little roadside zoos, those little touristy traps, like come feed the elephant, ride the elephant. And I know that when Dane was putting up some of the photos of the elephant, that there were people riding the elephants. Now I know it gets confusing when you see things on social media in regards to elephants. I know that there are orphanages and people get up there to wash the elephants and things. And so from what my understanding is, some of those are good things. And then there's the places where let's ride an elephant through the jungle, and that's not a good
Mhm.
thing. So I wanted to just clear up what was going on with those elephants that you were hanging out with, and were they being treated ethically, or what was that situation?
Yeah, so on one of the days that we were there, we did stop at an elephant camp, and this was a former government-operated elephant timber camp by the Myanmar Timber Enterprise, the MTE. And these were elephants that, again, were government-owned, formerly used in the logging industry, and now technically unemployed. And so at that location, you had a scenario where, to answer your question about the sort of care of the elephants and the cruelty involved, we still saw elephants that were chained when they weren't being used, when they weren't having the freedom of movement. They were chained by their legs. The keepers, the mahouts, were on elephant back and still had bull hooks to control the elephant. These are these very long sticks that have a sharp hook at the end, often, and in this case, a metal hook that's used to control the elephants, originally used to break the elephants and to train them, quote unquote, where the sharp hook is put behind their ear, on their leg, under their leg, as a way of just telling the elephant, in this case, who's boss. So you still had those forms of cruelty, but again, there's no profitability in these logging camps anymore, and therefore there's no profitability in having elephants in these logging camps anymore. So we saw tourists coming through and paying small amounts of money to feed the elephants fruits and vegetables, and you had 3 elephants with the mahouts sitting on their backs, bull hooks in hand, while young people fed them fruits and vegetables. And then you had a lot of elephant rides. So people would climb on top of a platform, climb on top of the elephant, and get taken around the timber camp on elephant back as, just an elephant ride for amusement. And so, on the one hand, given the situation of where these elephants are, what the problem is at the moment, and what solutions are presented, it's very hard to castigate the authorities for allowing this to happen. I mean, obviously, in an ideal world, we don't have elephants chained, we don't have elephants ridden, but right now, short of that, the elephants might be killed, sent to zoos or circuses overseas, or again, let free where they could be poached or killed in other ways. So for the moment, I can understand and appreciate why this is still happening. The question for us is simply how quickly we can get to a scenario where we can get elephants out of that situation and living as free as possible again. And I would just add one other thing. While we were there, we were informed that there have been some elephants that had already been exported to zoos out of the country. I think it was China and Japan, if my memory serves. So, we already have this problem ongoing of elephants being sent overseas for captivity. And again, that's a terrible quality of life for those animals for sure. And so, the Elephant Project needs to succeed as quickly as we can to give an alternative to this kind of exploitation that's ongoing in the timber camps.
Wow. And the zoo thing, I know we've talked about that for years, Adam. We saw, I think while you were in Myanmar, I don't know if you see this, but you can probably watch the reruns on it. In 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl did a whole thing on zoos.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed how their breeding what they were doing breeding wise in some ways. Some of it was cool because they were doing projects to get animals back into the wild. So there was this amazing positive change happening. At the same time, it showcased how, how some zoos, I think it was over in Germany, I don't want to get the wrong, or Amsterdam, somewhere in Europe, where they actually call their own animals and it's like, and people would go and see it and they would eat it and stuff. I was like, what is this? This is insane. There's this weird management thing, and so all the zoos are starting to have like a problem of what they're doing, and then they want the babies because then all these people look at them. So it's like it's insane what we were watching. I could not believe it, yet at the same time there's a silver lining of some people are doing the right thing, but they're almost playing God, in a way, with all the genetics and everything. Let's make the perfect, So I don't understand why they're bringing other animals in if they, some kill, some don't. I mean, it's bizarre.
Hmm.
It really was a bizarre thing. How
Yeah,
different it was
well,
across the country and around the world.
yeah, and it's only mildly dissimilar from the way it is here in the States and anywhere. When you look at the zoo industry, I think we just have to remember that it is an industry and it's a business in a sense. And so, there is going to be more money to be made by having young animals that are more attractive to the general public than old ones. People don't necessarily want to see old, creaky animals. And so that's part of the dynamic, really. And that's why, in the U.S. zoo industry, specifically with elephants, for example, you have elephants being moved from one zoo to another. You have older elephants being shipped to zoos that don't have elephants to make room for imports of new baby elephants. You remember that happened with elephants from Swaziland twice in our recent history. So, you have these situations where animals are being moved around. In I think it was Denmark, Copenhagen Zoo a few years ago, there was a giraffe, I think named Marius, that was maybe killed because, again, old and unneeded, too many animals, not breeding quality any longer. And so, yeah, they killed the giraffe, fed the giraffe meat to the lions in the zoo and allowed people to watch. Yeah. So you have this sort of shifting dynamic where, some animals are profitable in zoos, just like in Myanmar, elephants were once profitable in the timber industry, but others are no longer profitable. And so they may be shipped elsewhere or euthanized. And of course, in the States, you have a situation where an old animal of any kind, wild animal, may not be shipped to another zoo, but may be shipped to a roadside zoo, a menagerie, sold to a private buyer. There's all this different sort of commercial enterprise that's involved in the movement of animals. But with respect to elephants and zoos and the timber industry, it's interesting. Many years ago, it's probably been sort of 15 or 20 years ago now almost, there was a report done by the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the RSPCA, about the welfare of zoo elephants in Europe. And one of their findings was that elephants in logging camps in Southeast Asia actually had a higher quality of life, were able to breed and survive more effectively than zoo elephants.
Wow.
Specifically because even though they were captured, they were beaten to be trained, and they were used in intensive logging operations, they had a more interesting and energetic life than animals that were forced to languish on concrete in a small quarter-acre enclosure in some zoo where they were just spending most of their life perhaps alone, swaying back and forth. At least the logging camp elephants had some activity each day that kept them engaged and doing something that involved exercise. And I think that's another perfect example of why the Elephant Project is so important, because if we can get these elephants from logging camps into a sanctuary, we know that their quality of life is going to be infinitely better than those elephants going from logging camp to zoo or circus.
Now, isn't tourism something that would help? It just seems to me, after spending so much time in Africa, out in the wilderness, specifically to see animals in the wild where they belong. I mean, people pay to do that. I've never ever been interested in shooting at them because I don't understand that concept of trophy hunting and put a dead thing on your wall. Why would you want a dead body hanging on your wall? That doesn't make sense to me at all. So going out in the wilderness and seeing beautiful lakes and flowers and forests and seeing what's naturally there seems to me that is where the money would be if you have to make money off of a living creature. If that's the only value, if that's the only way we can save other living creatures is to put money on their heads, then why not do the pretty and kind and nice thing as opposed to hanging a dead body on your wall? I just don't get it.
No.
I just don't get
And
it.
skin, using their skin. I don't understand that.
I know. I mean, it's also yuck.
Are they using the skin for like handbags and things like that? Or furniture.
I think in Myanmar it's more for the medicinal purposes. I know in Africa there are a number of industries that use elephant skin, elephant leather. I've seen briefcases and boots made from elephant skin, but I don't know that that's as prevalent in Myanmar. And you know, you're quite right about sort of the desire to see animals alive, and that's, you know, that's something I always try and talk about too. Is that you know, technically, given the way the world is, right, that we're not sort of ready to go back to a more pristine way of having the natural world where things are untouched. You know, it's kind of hard to go backwards at this point. But consumptive use of wild animals, including elephants, is not an inherently bad thing. You know, you can actually make commercial profit by looking at animals. You know, you can consume them in that way. You don't have to kill them. And so there's nothing wrong with commercializing wildlife as long as it's done in a humane way that leaves the animals as free to be their natural selves as possible. And again, you know, that's what we're doing here, right? We're saying, you know, there are two ways that you can profit by having elephants. You can either profit by having them sold to zoos or circuses, or being used in intensive ways, or killed and skinned and eating their meat and using their tusks. You know, they're all hunting them. There are all these ways to use them in a consumptive way that's incredibly negative and harmful for the animals. Or you can use them in a commercial way that's perfectly within their natural needs, their behavioral needs, their environmental needs, their psychological needs. All of their well-being can be fulfilled. And that's really the model that we're pushing forward. So, you know, we fully intend to commercialize these elephants, but in a sustainable, humane way that fundamentally focuses first and foremost on their needs. So it's a very different thing to say, you know, we're going to profit by these elephants because they're going to be put into a zoo somewhere or a circus somewhere, and we're going to have them living naturally on 1 million forested acres in the Burmese forest, and people will simply pay for the privilege of seeing them. And you know, inevitably it's going to be the perfect situation, I think, in many respects, because like any safari, you may see these animals and you may not. You know, that's part of the wonder of it all. You know, you may buy a home and sit on your veranda, and one day you may see elephants in the distance, and the next day you may not, because they're living as natural as possible, and they're allowed to be in the forest cover, and they're allowed to be with others of their own kind. So in every way, this is a much more sustainable and humane solution to elephants in captivity and the needs of wild elephants.
Yeah, we're moving.
Well, exactly. Exactly.
We're moving to Myanmar.
Everyone needs a Burmese vacation home, I promise you.
So, you know, even from an educational standpoint, watching animals in the zoo is not anything close, not even close to watching animals in the wild. And so you're not really educating. You're kind of phony educating, because what the animal acts like is not what that animal acts like. So in fact, even animals that are born in captivity are losing part of who they really are all the time from generation to generation. I mean, some of them, I've seen like cheetahs that are fat, and I mean fat. Cheetahs are not fat in the wild. No, I mean, I remember that one cheetah was so fat. I'm like, what is that?
It's rude. You see that with not elephants, lions with those big thick necks, and then it's just, they don't. Yeah, it's not. It's
so that's not education. No. So that lets zoos out as, you know, their excuse for being educational. It isn't true. It's just totally not true. So to me, keeping them in the natural world, not only are you keeping like the planet together. I mean, when you take a huge species out of this web of life, like the elephant, out of the forest, you're not just hurting the elephant. There's a whole lot of different animals that depend on each other. And you're saving the forest too. Well, if you can save the elephants in the forest, then you're saving a whole bunch of birds and other animals.
You're restoring,
too.
and that's I think, you know, like we always talk about going down to this you know, Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge here in southern Arizona, and just watching everything come back. I mean, over the years, and knowing where certain animals are and, you know, where their habitat is. Like you get to know where this bird always lives in this tree, and they migrate through and come, you know, you start to watch this change happen. And when you start, like, every time we see a pronghorn, and then you see a pronghorn with a baby, you're like,
You're like,
oh,
oh,
there's more coming. Yay. It's working. And how the quail are coming back and the plants are
Exactly.
coming back. And it's from what I've seen with this, and I'm just fascinated. I have so much footage, of watching this growth and learning about it. And what it seems to me is that if the habitat is being restored and protected, the animals start to come back, the
Exactly.
wildlife, the birds are coming back, the beneficial insects are coming back, and then there's this healthy feeling. The air is cleaner, the water starts to clear up better. So it's really watching a wetlands here in Tucson. Suddenly they have all this, they call it duck algae or something, but they've been restoring this duckweed, and all of a sudden here comes all this duckweed, and it's this natural cleaning thing of the water. And so they're like, the water's now starting to take care of itself, and that means it's feeding the ducks. So I get all geeked out and excited about stuff like this, and watching this project be so unique and different. I think it's absolutely brilliant when you can take wildlife in non-consumptive, because we know how some people want to go, hey, let's go kill one, and then we're raising money. That doesn't, this to me is a way of educating, giving people a different kind of vacation. It's sustainable. It's sustainable for the habitat. It's sustainable for the wildlife, the elephants, the people. It's just such a brilliant solution that it's part of real estate. So is Airbnb going to come be part of this? Like, are you going to have elephant B&B, where people, all vacation homes or people living there?
No, we intend fully for people to be living there, for people to buy homes and live there, and also to have a community for the mahouts to live, so that they can have gainful employment, either looking after the elephants that they've historically looked after, or engaged in new professions that will be profitable for them. I mean, this is like a whole community that we're hoping to build as a way of supporting the local economy, the national economy, quite frankly, and looking after the people, who need looking after, and their whole families. So, I think it's going to be a mix. There'll be people who will live there, and people who will, simply vacation there. And you joke about Airbnb, but it's definitely on our wish list to see about a corporate partnership with them, or someone like that organization, that company, where they can, support the work and promote it, and have people who, if you want to go to Myanmar on vacation, what better place to go than to an elephant sanctuary where you can have that experience and a place to stay.
And there's tour guide opportunities, like for, there's nobody who knows the land better than someone who lives there. So
exactly.
The locals changing their jobs over to, hey, we're going to show you our temples, of the ones that they want people in or not. They can, that's up to everyone there. I was reading Dane Waters is the president and founder of the Elephant Project. And, I was reading his blog after he came back. I think it was for World Elephant Day. And from what he was saying, it seems like so many people, whether they're part of the resources, all these different meetings you went to, people in forestry, the government, you went on TV there, and I love those photos. I love their TV set there. It's so cool. But it seems that a lot of people really do want the support of the Elephant Project, and they do want to see the elephants being taken care of and be free as best as they can be in their environment.
Yeah, that's right. And it definitely was clear in Myanmar, and it has been clear to me in other parts of the world, that people seriously revere elephants everywhere. They just revere them. Now, for some people, they revere them and they want to see them in a zoo because they love them so much that they can't help but want to see them up close. For other people, they revere them. They want to see them on safari. In South Asia, people revere them and have them captive in temples. There's all these dynamics around the world of the way that we care about elephants, but then interact with them or relate to them. And Myanmar is no exception. There was definitely a strong feeling there that people love their elephants and want to do right by them. And if you talk to the people who own the elephants, they say the same things. And of course, again, for people who care about elephants in the West, our natural reaction is to say, well, if you cared about elephants, you would never employ them, you would never keep them in captivity, you would never chain them, you would never use them in logging camps. But that's just the culture and the way that it's always been done. And so the key is sort of taking that reverence for the animal and for the species and translating that into a new opportunity where people can still profit by elephants, be near elephants, look after, quote unquote, their elephants, but in a more humane, sustainable way. And that's really the key part of it all, trying to do this in a culturally sensitive way that moves, that shifts the paradigm quite a bit, so that, we're not suggesting that they shouldn't be able to have elephants, profit by elephants, revere elephants. It's just in a slightly new way that's still culturally appropriate, but better for the elephants and better for the people who care for them. Because again, these people aren't getting any profitability from these animals now. And so the key is, how can they get profitability from those elephants for years to come by being involved in the elephant project, as opposed to letting them go because they have no other option, or being at wit's end and profiting one time by selling the elephant somewhere in captivity.
Exactly. I mean, people go on safari, and once you've gone, like I had to go live in Africa. I couldn't just go 1, 2, 3 times. I'm just like, no, I got to go back, and I'm not leaving. And and I've had the experience of coming across poached rhinos and poached elephants, and it's so sickening and
heartbreaking.
and especially, they're big animals, and it takes a lot to kill them. So I understand the suffering that those animals go through, and sometimes they're not even alive. They're still alive when their tusks are cut out, and it's just the most disgusting thing. It's not sustainable. So to me, it just seems that the tourism factor, responsible tourism, not where people get out of their cars and do silly things, because I've seen that too, but responsible tourism in a natural setting is something that could be cared for generations.
And it's such
support so many people.
It's like making people's dreams come true too. Like, that's a bucket list thing, going to Myanmar and exploring there. It's like, oh my gosh. And then you go, wow, I could actually, stay in a place where I see elephants. And, hopefully we've talked about that. If you see the tiger in India, you're extremely lucky, but you're in that vicinity and you're getting to learn about the people. And that's something too I wanted to touch on, because a lot of people listening are going to go, well, Myanmar, isn't there unrest there? Should people be going over there? But I also, I worry about the people, but I also worry about the elephants too. So can you address that? Did you feel safe when you were there?
Yeah, I felt completely safe. And I think, the sense that I got was sort of, you have, well, let's just put it this way. I think there's a long-term plan for the country, and the Elephant Project is going to be a part of that plan, but just a very small part. One of the, anecdotally, one of the things I found so interesting was we were going to some meetings that were being held at the Parliament about the Elephant Project. And as we were driving on the main road to get there, I started counting the number of lanes on the highway. And I think there was 8 on each side, 8 lanes going in each direction, and maybe 5 cars total that I saw while we were heading into the Parliament. And the reason for that is that when they built the capital city, they did it with a 40-year growth plan in mind. They had a real long-term view of how growth in the country and growth in that city was going to happen. And so I think, when we look at Myanmar, kind of where it's come from in the past 10 years, with incredible civil unrest, a military government that's transitioning to a more democratic form of government, power sharing between civilian and military leadership, you end up with some very difficult situations that I think will be overcome over time, and probably not too much longer. And when that happens, you're going to have a transformed nation and a transformed economy. And I think as we look at the Elephant Project, we're going to be part of that transformation. So things are evolving. It was definitely, there was never a point in time where I felt anything other than safe, and we were treated incredibly well. And when we were at the timber camp, we sat down with the manager of the camp, and he brought us tea and snacks, and we sat and we had an honest chat about, what his ideal situation is for these elephants, their ability to live free and roam free. And that's not to at all minimize the challenges that have existed, and the people who have been hurt, the people who have been killed, the refugees that have been created through all of this unrest. But it's simply to say that that I don't think that is the defining the defining demographic, the defining perspective, the defining image of the country going forward. That I think they're going to come through that, and when they do, it will actually be incredibly positive, and it'll be a country on the rise. So I'm hoping that I'm not overly optimistic, and that's what happens. It would be a serious shame if there was a slide backwards, but I don't think anybody wants that to happen. I think it's just a matter of how to work through this political dynamic over time to get where the country needs to be.
It's exciting when you see countries on the move in a positive direction, and then you see them in like 5 years, 10 years, and to see how the changes have worked, and you see it all around the world. There's some good information and documentaries out there now that we didn't see before. That's really out there. You can see what's happened where you're hearing from the people themselves. One thing I wanted to touch on, and I'm so excited. The Elephant Project has a documentary coming up. It's Dominic and Nadia Gill. They've been on our show. Man,
they're so awesome.
They are awesome from Encompass Films. We interviewed them about maybe 2-3 months ago, actually, for a documentary they did called Coming to My Senses, which is absolutely mind-blowing. Everyone should watch that. Talk about overcoming something in life. A gentleman who was in a motocross accident and basically was paralyzed, his whole body, and went from being a racer to starting to do cycling events. And I think that's how Dominic and him connected, because Dominic cycled from Alaska down to the tip of South America or something. He's crazy cool that way.
Yes.
But yeah, but this documentary, I just want people to watch it, because the man who was paralyzed got himself to actually walk, and he helps people now get fit and be able to move again. And he walked across Death Valley, and he looked at Death Valley in a whole different way, not being on a bike, but actually walking. And it takes him little bit by little bit. And it was just that interesting shift of perspective about being out in nature that is a protected area, that you're seeing exactly what it's supposed to be. So I think that it's neat that they're going to do this. So is this going to be a series? What's going on? I want to watch. I want to watch the elephants.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer that, but if I could just say one more thing about sort of the political situation, because there was something else I wanted to add in that I think is really important. Actually, two quick things. One is, there are countries around the world that have these political shifts and power shifts, and things sometimes are in a perpetual state of moving forward. Sometimes things go backwards, and it's like whether you look at Kenya or Zimbabwe or Thailand or the United States, you never know what the next few years is going to hold. And some countries that you think are stalwarts of democracy end up sliding slightly backwards, if I could put it that way. And other countries like Myanmar, may be going forward. But the other thing I want to say on that too is, and this is probably the most important thing, is that it's almost because the situation is tenuous and because it's been so challenging that I think we really need to be there, because the elephants are what we're focused on most. And obviously, if we're not there, we know there's going to be tragedy. And we want to make sure that we don't leave the elephants behind simply because it's a challenging political environment to work in. So there may be real government abuses and real challenges and things that we find abhorrent that are happening as they go through this transition. But irrespective of that, there are 5,000 elephants that need lifetime care, and we don't want to just, ignore them simply because it's a challenging environment to work in, or there's been unethical abuses of people in the past. That is clearly horrible. There's no way to sugarcoat that, but we still have a responsibility as the Elephant Project to help those elephants. As for the documentary, those guys are amazing, and I'm glad you brought them up and that you brought up their films. I had met them once before, but this is the first time I got to spend some time with them and watch them work. And they take their craft so seriously and with such great artistic viewpoints that I think they can't help but tell a compelling story about why these elephants need this project so much and what the people are like, the people who have these elephants and who need some solution for these elephants, and why the Elephant Project is the innovative solution that could perhaps take them forward. I think, those guys really know what they're doing, and it was just a joy to be around them and to watch them work. And I'm not sure ultimately what the project is going to look like. I think, first they're getting, the promo piece together, sort of a short version of what the project is and why it's so important on the ground, and telling the stories of the people who are there and the elephants that they care for. And then the second step will be to raise the funds necessary to do a full-length documentary or a series about the elephants and about the project. I think that was, sort of always our vision, was that we would be able to tell this story from start to finish. So, it's the meetings with the government, getting the planning together, identifying the elephants and where they are and what the sites are in the country that could be available for us to build, and then, signing the letter of intent, signing the memorandum of understanding, working with the government to secure the land, putting the shovel in, starting the building, and then ultimately getting the elephants into a protected reserve adjacent to the residential development. All of that, I think, is an incredibly compelling story over 3, 4, 5 years of hard work. And once you have that story to tell, not only will people want to be involved because they'll see, but the thing that I've always found so important about the Elephant Project is that it's a replicable project. This can happen in Malawi, it could happen in Nigeria, it can happen anywhere that there's a need. And I'm hoping that, not only will we be able to fulfill the mission we have for Myanmar, but then we'll be able to use that experience and the telling of that story through the documentary to do this elsewhere in other ways and other places. So yeah, incredibly exciting stuff. And I'm excited to see what they come up with.
I'm excited about this whole program. And I'm like, come on, Dominic and Nadia, get it done. We want to talk to you again.
Right.
They were awesome when we chatted with them. It's to me, I love things that are duplicatable when it's the solution-based. It's more than a win-win. It's like one of those win-win-win-win. Everyone wins if we work together to do it. And it just makes complete sense. I know this is all at the beginnings, and it's complex. It's still very complex, yet it makes sense. What can listeners and our readers who read about this or hear about this in the magazines, what can they do now to get involved? First thing I'm going to say is you can start, sharing the links out and start, everybody use your social media power to share this and let people know about it. But are there ways that people can get involved besides that?
I think right now the most important thing folks can do is visit the website, theelephantproject.net, and sign up to get the blogs and the alerts that we send out so they can track the progress of the project, and that'll give them an opportunity to weigh in at appropriate times. So, for example, once we have the promo piece for the documentary, we'll put that online, and then we'll be soliciting funds to do the full-length documentary, and we'll definitely need financial support from people around the country for that. Once we get the letter of intent signed by the government, we'll need to undertake a series of scoping studies, environmental studies, market studies, security studies, to assess the viability of the project in different parts of the country and look at the land use planning issues. We'll need support for that. So we definitely need support, and I would always encourage folks to make a donation to help us with the good work we're doing. But for the most part right now, sort of the information, the educational part of what we're doing is so vital. So if people can just follow the Elephant Project on Facebook and all the social media platforms, they can keep track of what we're doing. And then also, they'll get interesting tidbits about what we're doing otherwise, because, we do want to help elephants everywhere. So we're definitely putting up a front against what the Trump administration is doing to weaken regulations preventing elephant trophies from coming into the country and all other manner of elephant protection efforts. So that's probably the most important thing. Information is king, and people should definitely log on and find out more about the work we're doing on an ongoing basis.
I saw somewhere on the blog that you were asking for people to write about their elephant experiences for World Elephant Day. I saw something there, and I thought that was really, really smart. You know, the people who have had a chance to see elephants, especially in the wild, to write about it and send photos. And I saw that it was mentioned that you would actually put those up. And I thought that was really smart.
Yeah, I
like that idea a lot.
I belong to a Facebook group, the National Geographic Women of Impact group. And it's probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life in regards to social media, where it's a closed group and you have to be accepted in. And then I got accepted. I'm like, oh, I got accepted. No, but anyway, no, I'm just kidding. But we met so many people, and so everyone introduces, and the one lady did that on World Elephant Day. She said, come on, share your elephant experiences that are positive for elephants. And it was absolutely amazing, the amount of women that stepped up. And it's absolutely amazing how many conservation women. I need to go in there and start saying, hey, come on over. come on over. But, you know, I'd love to see like a group thing like that, where people can kind of have like the Elephant Project Facebook group, nudge, wink, wink, where people can go in and do that as an ongoing thing of positive, and then any issues that they see that people can be involved in. I think it would be really cool, because it was mind-blowing to me, you know, because whenever, you know, these kinds of things, we look at animals and wildlife conservation, it's often depressing, you know, until you see these, you know, the pronghorn, the baby pronghorn is working, you know, or you see that freedom. And so when you see the amount of positive out there, it makes it number one, it was just really heartwarming, and at the same time gave like hope and made people really want to do more by seeing all of these beautiful creatures out in the wild. So it was really, really effective what I saw in that period.
Yeah, and it comes back to what I was saying before about the reverence that people have for elephants. You know, most people have their story wherever it may have been, that they read about elephants in a book or saw a movie, or, you know, were blessed to see them in the wild. And people have these stories because they certainly care about elephants and want to see them protected, and also want to share those stories, which is why, again, the documentary is so important about sharing personal stories and tales of enchantment and inspiration.
I love it. I love this project. Everyone, again, the elephantproject.net. Adam, always a pleasure having you on the show. And also, we can't wait for everyone to just come on. Let's get this going. Let's raise that money for the documentary. Let's go. Let's go to Myanmar. I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor on today's show. And they're strategically placed here by me, the International Food, Wine, and Travel Writers Association. It's a global network of journalists who cover the hospitality and lifestyle fields and the people who promote them. Everyone, if you go to ifwtwa.org, no matter if you're in tourism and the food wine fields, if you're a writer, or the destination, it's a great place to connect. And we do our second Friday food, wine, travel shows with them. But these journalists are all over the world. And I'm just saying, so when it's time, we want them to go to Myanmar. That's right. so they can cover this amazing project. So everybody, again, ifwtwa.org. Thank you all for joining us here on Big Blend Radio. Our shows air Sunday through Friday, and you can get the full schedule on bigblendradio.com. You can listen live on Blog Talk or anytime on demand from all the different outlets. We've got Spotify now, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spreaker, YouTube.
All over.
Just it's a big list. Just go to the website, bigblendradio.com. But Adam, thank you for joining us again. It's so exciting to see these kinds of projects. It's so positive what's going on there. But we have a nice song for you today. This one, I just thought it went well with Myanmar, is Lotus Blossom, because it just seems like such a magical, I know there's things, but it's just got that little, I want to go and just meditate in the mountains up there. I really do. So here's Lotus Blossom. It's from our friends Michael and Spider, who've actually, I know, interviewed you before on the show. And it's from their album Deities. And you can go to michaelandspider.com to learn more about their music. But thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Take care.